Hey y'all, Miss Macy here talking about the concepts in our second week of the comedy unit, which will focus on the language of humor. And we're going to do that with the standard where we essentially are going to figure out the meaning of words and phrases as they're used in whatever text we're reading. And we're going to see how those words and phrases contribute to and create the meaning and tone of that piece. So first up, we're going to look at some common terms and make sure that we have the diction we need to discuss comedy. So adding to that, we're going to begin with the context clues types of terms that we've covered many times, starting with denotation, which is the dictionary definition of a word. And you can have various words that mean essentially the same thing. So in this case, we're going to look at affluent and rich. They both mean having a lot of money. But when it comes to the connotation of the word, the meanings and feelings associated with the words, they are different. So affluent has generally positive connotations. It tends to make people think of somebody who is living very well. They have a nice house, nice car, they go on nice vacations, but they're not ostentatious. They don't show off with their money. Versus rich, which does tend to evoke those filthy rich phrases, very negative phrases where people are being ostentatious, where they are showing off their money to make a point of how much money they have. So it's that Scrooge idea of whoever dies with the most money wins, or it's, having gold plated everything in your house. You're showing off the fact that you are rich and have all of that money. So next up, we have hyperbole, which is extreme exaggeration used for emphasis. It's often used for comedic effect. So for example, if you say, if I don't get a snack soon, I'll starve to death. You are not going to starve if you are still talking about food in terms of snacks. So you are using exaggeration to talk about how hungry you are. Juxtaposition is this idea of placing normally unassociated ideas, words, and phrases next to one another for effect. In movies and in stories, they use a lot of tropes. So one of the tropes that they use is and stereotypes, that stereotype of a sophisticated city person and a country bumpkin. So taking one of them and putting them in the opposite area. So taking that sophisticated person from the city and having like a tire blow out, and then they end up stuck at a farmhouse where they have to deal with all the people that they just have always perceived of as being backwards and ignorant. And then that scenario plays out however it's going to play out in the writing or in the movie. Last up, we have anecdotes, which are brief, often entertaining accounts of an event. A lot of the storytelling jokes that you hear, they rely on anecdotes and such to make their point to, their goal is to tell you a story. And when it's a storytelling joke, their goal is to tell you a story and make you laugh at the same time. All right, next up, we're going to look at this concept of low comedy versus high comedy. When it comes to comedy, there is some debate in comedic circles and literary circles as to whether you can actually distinguish between different forms of comedy and categorize them in these two broad buckets of low comedy and high comedy. A lot of what creates that debate is that it's not a neat line between the two, because you'll see low comedy elements show up in high comedy, and in certain low comedy things, they'll pull some high comedy elements over there. So there is this mishmash or this interactivity or interconnection between the two. But in general, you can have two neat little buckets that you can move the bulk of comedic media to. So on the low comedy side, low comedy tends to focus on situational humor or a series of events. There's a lot of physical humor involved. So when you're thinking of slapstick comedy, like we talked about last week, and we're thinking of that superiority theory of humor, where the humor makes you laugh because somebody appears to be stupider than yourself. So it makes you feel better because whatever's happening to them is not happening to you, and it's hilarious. And if only they'd been as smart as you were, they would not be in that situation. So America's Funniest Home Videos is a great example of this. You are watching people make really foolish choices, ending up getting injured or falling down or embarrassed because of their foolish choice, so it makes you feel better. The goal of low comedy is to make you laugh. It's to make you laugh really hard. It's not to make you think. High comedy, on the other hand, is designed to make you think. So, satirical news shows like The Daily Show and The Colbert Report, or sketch comedy like Saturday Night Live or a Black Lady sketch show, or Get Out, which is a horror movie but actually brilliantly pulls in comedic elements and social commentary. They are trying to get you to think about serious social, political, and racial issues, about current events, by using clever wordplay, by using wit, by using pointed remarks, by using interesting characters and dialogue, and pulling those characters together in ways that both entertain and make you think. So when it's high comedy, you might just be like, "Ha, that's funny." When it's low comedy, you're laughing a lot. One type of high comedy is satire. And satire is this form of comedy that uses humor or irony or exaggeration to expose and criticize issues in society or someone's weakness. It's when it's well done, it can be very biting political commentary or social commentary. The goal is to make you think. It will probably make you chuckle a bit, but it's not designed to make you laugh. But these three terms, irony, sarcasm, and satire, can get a bit mixed up because they get used correctly and incorrectly all the time. So with irony, what you're doing is you're expressing your meaning by using language that is the opposite of what is meant or expected. It is very similar to sarcasm, but irony is directed at a situation or an event. With sarcasm, you're making a bitter or cutting remark that mocks or taunts, and it is directed at a person. So we're going to go and look at how this plays out for real. So as the Columbia Journalism Review says, they go with irony is to point out the absurdity of something, sarcasm is meant to wound. That's the difference. And that's probably the best delineation of it that I have seen. And so if you have this situation where you're waiting in a long and slow moving line at the grocery store and you notice that the cashier is struggling with making change, if you are going to make an ironic statement about that situation, you will turn to the person in line behind you and say, "Wow, time flies when you are having fun." And you are just making fun of the fact that you are stuck there waiting in a slow moving line and essentially that time is creeping by. Now, if you were to say that sarcastically, you would turn to the person behind you and say, "Wow, bet that genius has a PhD in math." So you are, in the first case with irony, you are making fun of the situation. In the second case with sarcasm, you are making fun of the person. And that's the difference between the two. So if we're reading and we're trying to figure out if the author is using irony or not, we want to look for four main things. So if it includes hyperbole and or obviously untrue statements, if it has a humorous tone, if it has a mood that highlights the absurdity of a situation or event, if it includes fake emotions, a fake sense of enthusiasm or despair, then overall what you're reading is likely ironic. The author is likely using irony to make their point. So we're going to look at next analyzing comedy with a twist. Now, TWIST is an acronym that stands for tone, word choice, imagery, style, and theme. So making sure we're all on the same page. Tone is the author's attitude about the topic. Word choice is the specific diction, the words and phrases that the author uses for effect. Imagery are the descriptive details and figurative language that the author uses for effect. Style is how the author uses language to create the desired effect. And the theme is the central idea of the text, a belief about some aspect of life that the author is trying to convey through text. So let's practice reading with a twist, and we're going to analyze this passage. Now, for context, I wrote this on day 3 of teaching school from home after the schools closed, and I was clearly bored that day. So I wrote, "Dear Diary, we have entered day 3 of teaching school from home. Critical supplies are running low. The house's co-occupants discovered my secret stash of chocolate-covered almonds and devoured them, leaving a few lonely pieces in the container. When confronted, this brood of vipers expressed no sense of remorse, offering only feeble excuses like, 'We live here too,' and 'We didn't take the last one,' in reply. I shall stash the remaining dozen in a safe place, rationing them to get me through the coming days until it's safe to venture out into the world again and resupply. Today, I'm beginning to understand why absence makes the heart grow fonder." All right, so we're going to use the twist method to analyze this passage. Now the tone is meant to be ironic, and it does use those 4 aspects of irony. It has a humorous tone, it includes hyperbole. Mood highlights the absurdity of the situation, and there is an expression of a fake or exaggerated sense of emotion, in this case, a sense of despair. The word choice that is being used for effect here, the specific diction. So we've got critical supplies are running low. We've got a few lonely pieces. We've got rationing them. A house's co-occupants. Feeble excuses. We have very specific types of word choices here that tend to evoke certain connotations. So feeble excuses, feeble being a weak excuse, has that negative connotation to it. Critical supplies are running low. You've got this sense of urgency being created by the use of critical supplies. A few lonely pieces has that connotation of, it's sad, depressing. Rationing them pulls that image of scarcity to mind. So you've got these specific word choice aspects that are creating a certain mood in the piece. And there's imagery being used as well. So you have this brood of vipers, which is actually a biblical allusion. Absence makes the heart grow fonder is an idiom. You have critical supplies and resupply, which is war imagery. And you've got these things being pulled together to kind of paint a picture. The style that's being used here is primarily the incongruity theory of humor, and it's expressing that incongruity with things like juxtaposition. We're pairing war imagery with working from home. It's expressing that theory with hyperbole, where the family is being compared to a brood of vipers. It's using connotation to create that sense of incongruity or that sense of humor with this, using phrases like the house's co-occupants and feeble excuses. It's an example of high comedy. It's satire. Now, the theme of this passage is basically showing how trivial complaints about working from home and running out of a favorite snack, how trivial they actually are as complaints in a time of crisis. And because it is this pairing of humor during a time of crisis, it's actually tapping into that release theory of humor where you're giving yourself or the audience a bit of a break from the tension of that crisis or caused by that crisis. So when you're analyzing anything we read from a comedy point of view or any point of view, you can use the same concept, this twist breakdown, to figure out exactly what the author meant as you read the work. So you're looking at their tone, their word choice, their imagery, their style, and how those things all work together to create a mood for the piece, to create a theme, to help you understand what they meant. So we'll practice that on our own with this week's assignment. But Until then, stay safe and be well.